Faces on Mars. For decades, NASA has been studying Mars with the hopes of finding everything from running water to extraterrestrial life. However, in 1976, they found something that seemed to defy the laws of everything we thought possible. In that year, NASA launched the Viking 1 mission. The spacecraft's goal was to snap pictures of the Martian surface, and for years it did just that. However, in the very first year, the orbiter sent back a very strange photo. In the Cydonia region in Mars's northern hemisphere, there's a rock that seems to have the impression of a human face. Soon, the photo went public, and many began to theorize that such a human face wasn't natural, but instead the work of alien hands. However, NASA vehemently denied these claims, instead saying the face was simply caused by light shining strangely on the area. In April of 1998, all doubts were put to rest when NASA's Mars Global Surveyor took more detailed images of the area and proved that no face actually existed there. Later, other high-resolution images from subsequent missions by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the European Space Agency's Mars Express revealed that the original analysis of the images was correct. The face is an optical illusion, revealed only as the light hits the surface and wells of the rocks at specific angles. It's also worth noting that the face is not the only strange rock to be seen on Mars. During its mission, the Viking 1 orbiter captured several other intriguing images. One of the most interesting was the Gale crater, which has a curved mountain range and two mountain clusters that create the appearance of a smiley face. Another is a lava flow pattern on the large volcano Alba Patera, which when looked at on pictures is very similar to the popular Muppet Kermit the Frog. And while these may look too human-like to be coincidental, the reality is they're formed by natural forces and look the way they do completely by chance. Devil's Slide. Utah's got the title of being the most religious state in the United States. After all, 53% of residents attend worship services at least weekly. It's likely thanks to this prevalence of religion that one of the state's grandest rock formations is wrapped in religious lore. First discovered by local settlers in the 1840s near the border with Wyoming, the Devil's Slide has a fairly standard geological explanation. Consisting of two 12-meter-tall parallel limestone rock walls protruding from an otherwise flat mountain face, it looks like a massive slide and was likely formed about 75 million years ago. The story goes that around this time, a large geologic episode happened in the United States, and this episode caused the folding and faulting of rocks, creating large mountain ranges such as the Rocky Mountains. By chance, a large limestone protrusion in Utah was one of the things created. However, while the slides of the protrusion contained hardened, weather-resistant rocks, the middle was a shaly limestone that was rather soft. This made it susceptible to erosion, and over time, the forces of nature wore the middle away, thus creating the chute of the slide. Now, this slide was then discovered by Utah's settlers in the 1840s, and they named it the Devil's Slide sometime before 1875, and it's been a tourist site ever since. Yet due to its strange shape, many believe that it was the work of someone's hands, and there are several religious explanations for its existence. One story claims that when God threw Lucifer out of heaven during the biblical War of Heaven, he passed through Earth and slid down the mountainside along the route of the Devil's Slide before arriving in hell. Another legend states that a Christian missionary by the name of Father Pietro del Toro was traveling through the area when he encountered the devil. Disguised as a fellow Spaniard, he reportedly tried to tempt Del Toro by offering him food, spirits, wealth, and other fine material things. However, every time he was offered something, Del Toro resisted. When the devil then threatened to kill him, Del Toro held up a crucifix and prayed. This weakened the devil and caused him to fall down the side of the mountain, thus forming the Devil's Slide. In any case, no matter what you believe in, what's certainly clear is that the Devil's Slide is a pretty cool natural landmark. Yalu Geopark. While Taiwan may be famous today for its geostrategic importance, it's also had its fair share of nature, and one spot in particular that's especially famous is Yalu Geopark. First catapulted to fame after Taiwanese photographer Huang Seichu published his series Yalu, Forsaken Paradise in 1962. Ever since, these photographs have brought in throngs of visitors. While this was at first limited to more local Taiwanese and Chinese tourists, the park now receives visitors from across the earth, and it's not hard to see why. After all, thanks to the powers of erosion, this park is home to a number of strange rock formations that look like they were sculpted by humans. Of these, few stand out in particular. Perhaps the most famous is the Queen's Head, whose long neck and face-like visage and tiara makes it look like a statue of Cleopatra. The park's also home to so-called sea candles, which dot out the beachfront, and large rocks that look like a sandal, which according to local legend was left by a fairy that came down to Earth to tame a turtle spirit. Yet while this geopark may be very cool, there are some very real risks that come from having such a well-visited operation. While the extra attention has brought more money to help tend to the park's rocks, it's also been a double-edged sword. Despite the fact that there are multiple signs and markings to warn throngs of tourists to stand back, many don't listen and decide to climb on or otherwise damage the rocks. It's because of this, just in case, strong measures have been taken to ensure their continued existence. For example, the park has tested out special paint designed to slow down erosion. It has, at times, also resorted to building replicas. In fact, some areas where the coastline is frequently racked by storms, these replicas are the only remnants of famous formations. So, if you think these rocks are cool, I'd suggest visiting soon. They may be completely gone sooner rather than later. Giant's Causeway. So most beaches are expansive coastlines filled with pebbles, sand, or a mix of the two. However, the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland looks like none of these. Rather than be built of normal materials, it consists of about 40,000 interlocking hexagon-shaped columns. Rising vertically like steps, they look like they were carved by humans. However, their origin is a geological one. The story goes that during the Paleogene era, about 50 to 60 million years ago, Northern Ireland was a subject to very powerful volcanic activity. During this period, molten basalt came into contact with chalk beds, forming a lava plateau. When this lava cooled quickly, the plateau contracted and cracked. Now, this cracking would create the hexagonal shape. Depending on how fast the lava cooled, the actual height of the columns would change. At their largest, some of them now stand at a height of about 11 meters. But local legend tells of a very different tale. The story goes that an Irish giant by the name of Finn MacCumhail, better known as Finn MacCool, was challenged to a fight by his Scottish rival, Benadonner. In order to reach Benadonner, MacCool built the causeway across to Scotland. At this point, there are a few stories that exist. In one version of the story, Finn simply goes over the causeway and wins the battle. In another, it was said that while in transit to Scotland, Finn fell asleep. While he was sleeping, Benadonner decided to cross the causeway to look for his competitor. To protect her sleeping husband, Finn's wife gathered him up and wrapped him in cloth in order to camouflage him as their child. When Benadonner made it to Northern Ireland and saw the large infant, he got scared, as he imagined that if it was his baby, Finn must be absolutely massive. Frightened, Benadonner fled back to Scotland, but the causeway remained. In any case, the Giant's Causeway has since become quite famous. After all, there's evidence of tourism dating all the way back to the late 17th centuries. And its popularity exploded after the creation of the Giant's Causeway Tramway. In the 1960s, the National Trust took it over its care, and ever since it's been looked after in a more monitored and less commercial way. In 1986, it became a World Heritage Site. In 1987, it was turned into a nature reserve, and now it's a beautiful and free place to visit. Best of all, it's only about an hour drive north of Belfast, making it an incredible spot for a day trip. Pamukkale. Of all the spots on this list, few have a history quite as interesting as Pamukkale. While these travertine terraces look man-made, they were in fact created by sedimentary rock deposited by mineral water from the 17 hot springs located nearby. This whole complex is located in southwest Turkey. The area has been nicknamed the Cotton Castle in Turkish, and it's easily one of the most beautiful natural wonders in the country. Unsurprisingly, a terrace of picturesque white pools with hot 35 degrees Celsius water has not been ignored by locals. For millennia, Pamukkale has had a human connection. In fact, the earliest archaeological evidence in the area suggests that the Phrygians built a temple here at some time in the first half of the 7th century BC. Then, in the 2nd century BC, Pamukkale was really put on the map after the Seleucid Empire founded the city of Hierapolis nearby. This was done in order to facilitate access to the thermal spas of Pamukkale, and throughout the reign of Emperor Antiochus the Great, thousands of Jewish families are said to have set up shop here. In time, Hierapolis became a thriving healing center as doctors attained impressive results using thermal springs as a treatment for their patients. By 133 BC, the city was in the hands of the Romans, who, rather strangely, were gifted the city in a will after its ruler died. It soon became part of the Roman province of Asia, and over time it became an important cultural center. In fact, it was an early stronghold of Christianity. Once the Eastern Roman Empire fell, the Byzantine Empire took over, and over the years the city continued to flourish as an important center for Christianity. While neighboring Pamukkale was left mostly alone for quite some time, it soon began to face new challenges. Throughout the 1900s, the area became heavily commercialized as hotels began to be built atop the site. Soon, both neglect and commercial development was threatening to seriously damage the pools, creating a real problem. Thankfully, both Pamukkale and the ruins of Hierapolis were designated as a joint UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1988, leading to a lot more regulation and conservation. And while there's been an increase in protections, you can still visit Pamukkale today and swim inside the pools, making it a great bucket list item for those who love the intersection of history, the Devil's Wall. For thousands of years, the Teufelsmauer, which is known as the Devil's Wall in English, has been the subject of curiosity and folklore. Made of sandstone, it extends for 16.5 kilometers across central Germany. While it almost looks like some sort of human-made fortification, it in fact formed about 85 million years ago. According to the geological record, it was originally underwater. However, shifting tectonic plates caused it to rise to a higher elevation, and over time, the wall has taken on a rather decrepit look due to erosion. However, local folklore tells a far different creation story. One tale, collected by the brothers Grimm, explains that when God and the devil were fighting for dominion over the world, the devil was given a time frame to build a fence dividing the earth in two. He, however, was unable to finish the wall in time and got none of the earth at all. In his anger, he knocked most of the wall down, and today, this devil's wall is the only part of the structure that still remains. There's another variation of this legend that involves, of all things, a rooster. The story goes that, like in the last tale, the god and devil were fighting for possession of the earth. They agreed that God would keep the fertile plains and the devil the ore-bearing mountains, if and only if he completed a boundary wall by the time the first cock crowed. While he built it up to the edge of the mountains, a woman passing by with a rooster ruined the devil's plans when it crowed when the devil was just one rock away from completion. In response, the devil destroyed the wall in rage, leaving a small segment that's still here today. Interestingly though, some of these stories surrounding the wall have nothing to do with a god or devil at all. In what can be seen as a more pagan tale, it's been said that once upon a time, a soldier granted a tract of land in the area. He soon got to work clearing all the trees until there were just 3 left. At this point, he took a nap, but as he slept, he heard some little female figures speak to him from the branches of the trees. They were crying because they believed they would lose their lives thanks to the soldier's tree cutting. Upon hearing this, the soldier felt bad and promised that no harm would come their way. While he kept his word, in later years one of his descendants chopped the trees down. This in turn led to the land drying up and becoming unfertile, creating the desolate area we see there today. While these are seen only as legends today, the Devil's Wall has continued to maintain the public's interest. Sometimes this has been for negative reasons. After all, in 1833 it had to be placed under special protection to prevent opportunists from extracting its sandstone. However, it now receives thousands of visitors each and every year, making it a great spot to visit on a trip through the German countryside. The Old Man of the Mountain. While most of the entries on this list still stand today, Old Man of the Mountain is a sad example of a natural formation that has been lost to time. Located in the state of New Hampshire in the United States, the Old Man of the Mountain was a series of 5 granite cliff ledges on Cannon Mountain. When viewed from the north, they look like the jagged profile of a chiseled human face. Now, the mountain itself was shaped by glaciers, although the Old Man likely formed after the freezing and thawing of water created cracks in the granite bedrock about 12,000 years ago. While it was first noted by white Americans when surveying teams worked in the area in 1805, for years before it had been a well-known spot for indigenous peoples. According to the local Abenaki people, the rock face was made by a man named Niiskissos. More specifically, he was a strong leader and provider in his community, and while conducting business on its behalf, met and fell in love with a beautiful woman named Tarlo. However, Tarlo had eventually returned to her birth village because her family members had become sick. Upon hearing this, Niiskissos promised he would live atop the mountain, looking out for her by day and building a fire to guide her back by night. According to legend, Niiskissos died keeping that promise, and as such he became part of the mountain so he could keep on guard forever. For non-native people though, the Old Man also managed to gain a special significance. After all, it's been New Hampshire's state emblem since 1945, and was put on the state's license plates, route signs, and the back of the statehood quarter. Yet despite its popularity and ability to draw in tourism to New Hampshire, it wouldn't last forever. You see, by the 1920s, freezing and thawing opened up fissures in the Old Man's forehead that were wide enough to require repair. Then in 1957, the state spent $25,000 on further weatherproofing and used 18 tons of dry-fast cement, plastic covering steel rods and turnbuckles to try to keep the face in place. Yet despite these prevention measures, on May 3rd of 2003, the entire thing collapsed. While this may have been the end for most monuments, people of New Hampshire didn't want to let the old man die. While state funding was used to create a memorial at the site of the old monument, in 2006, David, Paul, and Kenneth Scarpetti took matters into their own hands. You see, the three of them owned a self-storage facility and wanted to honor the old man's legacy by creating a replica of the granite face on the premises. Once all was said and done, it measured in at 3 meters tall, or about 1/4 the size of the original. Despite its smaller size, though, it took a lot of effort to make. After all, 36 tons of granite and more than $25,000 in funding went to create the structure. However, given how beautiful the end result was, I'm sure that both the Scarpetti brothers and most of the local community would say that it was well worth it. If you want to visit it yourself, it's located in front of Profile Self-Storage in Hooksett, New Hampshire, making it a great pit stop on a road trip through New England. Fairy chimneys. While fairy chimneys may look like the creation of a magical little creature, they're an entirely natural occurring phenomenon. Located in Turkey's Cappadocia region, they trace their origins back to volcanic eruptions that happened millions of years ago. These eruptions left behind layers of a solid yet soft material known as tuff, and was later covered by a harder material known as basalt. Over the years, the forces of erosion wore away at these layers, and since tuff is quite soft, it easily dissolved. Since the basalt was tougher, it remained, leaving behind hollow caves where the tuff once was. It didn't take humans long to catch wind of these caves, and thus over the centuries they've seen a variety of different uses. And Indo-European peoples known as the Hittites were the first to settle in the area around 1800 BC, and they soon realized that the soft tuff below the fairy chimneys could be excavated and carved into rooms, and soon went on to create underground cities. One of the most famous is Derinkuyu. It's buried as much as 85 meters below ground. It consists of 18 different floors. However, while the Hittites founded it, it was the invading Phrygians who captured it and turned what was then just a few floors into a bustling city. However, the underground civilizations of Cappadocia were used to their fullest extent by early Christians. You see, during the early years of the religion, Christians often found refuge in them in order to escape persecution by Roman authorities. These Christians were later given freedom of religion and in time were subsumed by the Byzantine Christians. As such, these Byzantine Christians created a system. During times of peace, they remained above ground in the fairy chimneys, carving homes for themselves out of the caves. In fact, you can still see the soot-blackened walls of former kitchens and Byzantine churches hewn into the rock. However, during times of war, it's believed that around 20,000 residents would shelter underground in Derinkuyu. The top floor was used to house animals and store grain, ensuring that the smell and gases produced from the livestock could be vented to the surface. The underground cities of Cappadocia were used intermittently up until the 20th century, when the Cappadocian Greeks frequented them to escape persecution by the Turks. Yet when the last Greeks were expelled from the country in 1923, the subterranean cities were closed up and forgotten. However, in 1963, they were rediscovered after a local man found a secret underground room when he was renovating his basement. This room led to the city of Derinkuyu, and ever since, there's been an increased archaeological work and tourism in the area. In 1985, the Cappadocia area, containing both the fairy chimneys and underground city, became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and today many of the fairy chimneys and cave complexes have now been converted into boutique hotels, where it's possible to have a comfortable stay in a unique location. There also continues to be new discoveries. For example, in 2019, a 5,000-year-old underground city was found nearby that stretched to almost 1.2 square kilometers. So, I'm sure that as time continues to pass, more and more cool things are going to be found in Cappadocia. Precariously balanced rocks. Of all the natural structures out there, few seem to defy the laws of physics as much as precariously balanced rocks. They're known as PBRs for short. Several categories exist. However, by definition, they are large rocks balancing on top of smaller rocks. Now, while there are versions of these rocks that are made by artists as a form of expression, there are thousands of examples out there that are made not by human hands, but by the forces of nature. It's these strange rocks that not only look very cool, but can also teach us an awful lot about geography. For instance, in Colorado Springs, there's a 290-million-year-old red sandstone boulder known as balanced rock. Naturally perched on a sloped ledge, this 600-ton monstrosity looks like it's about to topple over, yet miraculously stays in place. Another notable example is Kumakivi, located in Finland. It's a 7-meter-long boulder that lies on a convex bedrock that was formed between 11 to 12,000 years ago. Perhaps most fascinating of all, though, in Goblin Valley State Park in Utah, there are thousands of PBRs known as hoodoos. They're mushroom-shaped rock pinnacles that are often several meters tall and are usually very oddly shaped. Now, not all PBRs are made equal. Some were created thousands of years ago when retreating glaciers placed them where they are today. Others are the love child of erosion, which carved away at large rock faces until they became the PBRs they are today. Some are also not PBRs in a strictly definitional sense. While many of these rock structures appear to be balanced, they may be connected internally by a slim spine of rock. This makes them far sturdier than they appear to be. One pervading issue with PBRs is that it's often not nature, but humans that lead to their ultimate demise. That's because there's some people out there that think pushing them over is entertaining, not realizing or caring that this has implications on scientific research. And while jail sentences can be imposed, or people are caught red-handed, their location in rural areas makes enforcement really hard. As a result, people pushing over PBRs will probably continue to be a problem for years. It's also worth noting that, weirdly enough, there's a certain set of balancing rocks that have made a massive splash in the media about 20 years ago. You see, in the mid-2000s, Zimbabwe's sky-high inflation rate made them a poster child of the dangers of a poorly run economy. And when I mean sky-high, I really mean it. Thanks to the decision to overprint money, at the crisis's peak, inflation reached a staggering 79.6 billion% per month, while year-over-year inflation reached an astonishing 89.76 tillion% between the beginning and end of 2008. It was out of this inflation that ridiculous inventions such as the $100 trillion bill had to be created. And on all of these bills, one could find, of all things, a stack of rocks. Why exactly was a stack of rocks on there? Well, it turns out something pretty significant. Known as the Balancing Rocks, they're located in Matopos National Park and were chosen as a symbol of development and environmental protection following the country's independence from the white-ruled Rhodesia. And while the environmental protection piece may still reign true today, the development piece has been lacking. After all, its economic woes took a toll on the country, and while it's currently on the upswing, it still has a long way to go. In any case, if you want one of those $100 trillion notes with the Balancing Rocks on it, they can be had on eBay for about $100 a pop, making them a pretty interesting curiosity item. Thanks for watching, everyone.